Yeah, so I've been working in Fynbos conservation and now national plant indigenous conservation for a very long time. And to have the prominence of the president speaking about um, things that most people take for granted is really been spectacular. Um, when his speechwriter Khadija Magardi called me in the week to just chat about this, it was great to see and also to hear now how well those concepts were grasped by the president because it's a very complex system actually if you're not used to it. And of course, for many South Africans, you're not familiar with it because it is this very narrow strip at the bottom of South Africa, relatively speaking. So, yeah, it's great that we get to highlight the Fynbos, but that's just the beginning. Hopefully, there's many other awesome vegetation across the country with its own pressures and values for us to learn from.
Yeah. So, what is it then, do you think, about the Fynbos, given the options we have at our disposal, that made the president decide that this is the metaphor to try and carry South Africa through what's really been an unprecedented year gone by?
Sure. So I think earlier you spoke about eight plants, and remember the Fynbos is many plants. So it's like more than 9,000 species. And it's best to look at them at communities. And the miracle of these communities is that the more healthy and diverse they are, the more resilient they are. And there's a lesson for us already. And then if you look at the post-fire recovery that the president mentioned, um, that's true. But there's also layers to it, you know. So fire comes at the wrong time. That's also not necessarily good. However, the resilience of it is quite miraculous. So in the Cape, even people who live here, when a natural fire goes through, they think that things have been destroyed completely, as in your pictures there. And it's basically a cleaning of the slate for new life. There's recycling of nutrients that happen. It's making space for different plants who respond immediately to fire. So there's a whole succession thing going on where exactly that's a great picture of the first bulbs kind of responding immediately after fire, and then you have the succession. So even if you look at the picture behind me, that's a 2-year-old fynbos in the Gullis Plain area, and so you get to learn about what happens at different stages, and that destruction. It looks like destruction, but it's part of renewal. And I think that metaphor is especially apt for the fact that, you know, we've had this hectic impact on COVID, not just in South Africa, but across the world, and also on conservation, because, you know, tourism's taken a knock. A lot of resources come from external visitors to our amazing botanical and other biodiversity wealth. And now we've got to figure out a way how to let these green shoots come again.
Interesting. What is it about the conditions in South Africa that allow the fynbos to thrive the way it does? I mean, I'm assuming this is a plant that's pretty unique to our region, yeah?
Hmm. No, so it's a community basically, and what so the thing is, like all things in ecology, there's not an easy answer. However, the fynbos biome stretches from just inside the Northern Cape all the way down to where I am in Cape Town and heads out to the Eastern Cape around Port Elizabeth. And what's special in the epicenter here in the southwest is the fact that we've got a Mediterranean ecosystem. So that means it's hot and dry and windy in summer, and that's when the fires happen. And then in winter, it's cool and wet. So that's one of the major things that drive it. And then it's also the geology of the Cape is also quite different to other parts of the country. It's very low nutrients. So all these kind of things that are seen as pressures um, are also actually opportunities for speciation historically. So you know that's the wonderful thing about nature is that you know put it under pressure and it responds to it. And now us as humans, of course, we affect that ability of the plants and animals and everything else to respond to it by you know developing it and impacting on natural processes, you know. So we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that we support nature in this country. Government's already done a really good job. Our legislation is fantastic. We've got good institutions in provinces and so forth, amazing online tools and planning. But now it's time for all of us, civil society, NGOs, government itself, to work together to say, we've got this unique gift in the country, not just the Fynbos, but all the other botanical hotspots in the country. And how do we pull together to make sure that our future generations still have it and we can get things from it, like the ecosystem services that are provided, water, medicinal plants, pollination. I mean, yeah, the list goes on.
Yeah, and you already alluded to this in some respects already, but I mean, it was great to hear this ecosystem or this community of plants being referred to literally from the highest office in the land. But you also insinuated that, you're hoping this is just the first of several steps to come to try, and assist the sector, so to speak. Where would you say the gaps exist as we speak?
Yeah, so I think, and I'm talking with my botanist hat on, I'm a botanist by training. We have a shortage of field botanists in the various state institutions. And we've got a fantastic partnership here with the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and a lot of those kind of primary roles to support plant conservation work, like people who do the description of new species of plants, the taxonomists, people who do the red list, to look at the locality data and get information from field people to see where the pressures are. There would be need for more of those people, and then it's also just the storytelling, So the fact that people can make it all the way through education in South Africa and not really have a grasp of how special our plants are. And that's what we're always trying to do at the Botanical Society. We've got a 4-word tagline: know, grow, protect, and enjoy South Africa's indigenous plants. So there's a role there for everyone.
And in your work then, as a botanist, what stories do you usually tell people who start finding out about the Fynbos? I mean, how are you selling this community of plants to South Africans, if you are?
No, look, it's been more than a decade of trying to answer that question, of saying we've got this amazing health and wealth of plants who've got great stories, and we're still finding species that haven't yet been described by science within 100 kilometers of Cape Town, and there's been a lot of botanical exploration here. And if you go to the rest of the country, there's in the cities, there are these amazing little remnants that people don't see as important. Like, people tend to think that nature is something we need to conserve out there, a national park or so forth. But a lot of our richest systems are actually in our urban areas, and that's that also means that it's accessible to people. So you could have a nature experience within most of our cities. So we've got the National Botanical Gardens that Sambi run, but also these little bits of land which are sometimes owned by the state or sometimes private owned. And those are the ones where we all need to, especially if you're in a city, start thinking about how can we manage these bits better, and see what we can do. And then those stories are across the board. So each South African group has got its own unique relationship with the local vegetation. So, I mean, if you think historically about the Khoi and the Sun here in the Southwest, there were definitely unique plant uses, and a lot of that knowledge has been lost. And then, I've just been in Mpumalanga last year. There's a biodiversity management plan for medicinal plants in the Eshlazeni district. And there's like a very strong culture of still using plants, but the problem is that we're too many people, and we're extracting it from the wild in a way which is not sustainable. So we need to look at how we start growing plants and maybe putting them back into these natural areas. But I think the first thing is just to notice plants, and the contribution that they give, and be a champion for plants, essentially, for South Africa's plants.
Absolutely. Incredibly fascinating history and context. Thank you so much for coming onto the AM Report and getting us a sense of what you know. Truly appreciate it.